Secretary Bill Bennett.
Thank you, President. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I feel like I should wave. Where's the North Carolina delegation? All right, I am here tonight to put in the name nomination. No, I'm not, no. Enough of that. I will, in fact, having listened the last 3 nights, try to avoid every cliche, tired cliche possible. I will rather go for hope and change. Okay. See, it's hard. It's hard. It's great to be here. Great to, Lisa, thank you very much. Congratulations. Great to be back with Alec. I've been fishing for an invitation for 25 years now. It's been a long time. But that wooden statue you gave me is getting a little old, so I need something to update it. But I am delighted to be here. We have a great panel this morning, and I want to get to it. I also was reviewing all your other panels and presentations. A couple I wished I could have made. The higher ed panel, if I can be any help to you all on that. Wrote a book on it recently, and I have some interest in it. I'm also on a couple of boards in that area. And the heroin and opioid addiction. This is a deadly, deadly serious problem. I know something about that, having been the first drug czar. So if I can be of any help, please call on me. Let me just say a couple things about education to remind you of its importance, as if it needed to be done with this audience, and then we will proceed with the panel and our important discussion. 3 of my favorite quotes about education I keep close to mind and close to heart. H.G. Wells said, "Life is a race between education and catastrophe," and I think that's right. The second, very old, Plato. And if I could just put in other words, he says at one point in the great dialogue, The Republic, I won't do it in Greek because I can't, but he says, "Dear friends, dear friend, just remember the most important question in the society that we would construct is who gets to teach the children and what do they teach them?" And we all know the importance of that. You can see the differences that were taught to children by watching these 2 conventions. These aren't 2 conventions. These are 2 different worlds. These are almost 2 different planets. The most important thing are who are the teachers and what do they teach the children. And the third quote is contemporary. It's from this year. I won't quote it so much as paraphrase it. It's just something to think about. It's a little chilling. It's from a book called Submission by Michael Hollenbach, and it's fictional, but it's based on fact. It's about France, maybe 10 years from now, in which a radical Islamic party gains political power through the population increase and merges with the Socialist Party and becomes the governing party. The interesting thing that happens when they become the governing party is they basically yield most of the government to the socialists. They give them commerce, they give them defense, they give them finance, they give them regulation, they give them transportation. What do you want? The socialists say to the radical Islamist party, just called the Islamist party. And they say, we want only one, education. We are playing for the long run. Education is for the long run. My message today is this. We have, and I know this sometimes gets tired, seems cliched, but we really do have an unusual and I think unprecedented opportunity to seize the day, carpe diem, seize the day when it comes to education. I've been at this for 45 years. I've been at it for 45 years as a conservative. I have been frustrated over and over again by the fact that Democrats take up this issue, liberals take up this issue, and many Republicans cede it to the liberals and the Democrats. I have been in 600 schools over the course of my life and I know the difference that this can make. We need more of a presence in America's schools and in American policy. Let me tell you why we have this opportunity, I think maybe the best opportunity in my lifetime right now. There is a new law of the land. My friend Leah Ukmir has already mentioned it, the Every Student Succeeds Act, ESSA. No child left behind is no more. That's a good thing. No child left behind is left behind. Yep, you bet. ESSA was a huge conservative victory. It returns education policy making to the states. It ends the imposition of Common Core by the federal government on the states. It prohibits the federal Department of Education from dictating or incentivizing state education policy directions. And there is now an incredible opportunity for Republicans to set the education policy in states without federal intervention. More opportunity to set education policy in the states than we have had before without federal intervention. I don't have to tell you, as ALEC members, the power that you have. 99 legislative chambers in the country, 68 of them are controlled by Republicans. Interesting, when people choose the governors they want close to them, where they choose and how they choose. Education policy will now be set by you and your colleagues should you choose to do so, and this could make a tremendous difference. This is great news for parents and for students. I want to help ensure these policies are rooted in conservative principles. Among them, one's familiar to me, one's familiar to you. Local control, choice, accountability, content. And make no mistake, the other side will not surrender. It's not going to concede defeat. The unions and the education bureaucrats are already well organized to influence these proceedings in the states. They understand the center of action has shifted from Washington to the state capitals. You all know better than I how intense it already is in those state capitals. Who will represent as vigorously the conservative viewpoint? Well, I hope to be active in this area, and I want, with your help, to create a conservative drumbeat and movement on what conservative education policy looks like. Therefore, we are here today to share with you and announce to you information about a new coalition we have started that we hope will act as a resource for conservatives while navigating the new process, the Conservative Leaders for Education. Conservative Leaders for Education. You can go to our website, www.conservativeleaders4ed.org. We do it again, www.conservativeleaders4ed.org. Or see Kelsey Dean. Kelsey, would you wave? You're back there somewhere. You're up here. Come see Kelsey up here for more information. We hope you'll be hearing more about it. So let's seize the day. Let's grab this day. Let's grab this opportunity. It's a great opportunity, both in terms of timing and opening and the power at the state and local level. Let's seize the day and create a better education future for our country. Let me start this conversation with people who will be doing this. I will be at 30,000 feet, maybe 40,000 feet if you prefer, maybe even further away if you prefer. But you will be on the ground. We want to start this conversation right now. And I'd like to invite Senator Howard Stevenson, who heads the ALEC Education Task Force. It was my pleasure to meet last night and hear some of his views. I'd like to invite him to the stage. We would also like to invite some of your fellow legislators, Representative Amanda Price from Michigan, Senator Mike Wilson from Kentucky, Semper Fi, and Representative Paul Boyer of Arizona. I'd like them to join us as well. We want to talk about the opportunities state legislators will have to put their mark on ESSA implementation, and also discuss some work we are doing on founding principles for conservatives on education. Then we'll take some of your questions. Okay, let me go to my chair, my proper place here. Hi, guys.
Good morning.
Morning, morning. I used to get up at 4 a.m. for a radio show. It seems like lunchtime. I want to start this conversation with your help. So let's do it this way. Senator Stevenson, Representative Price, Representative Boyer, Senator Wilson. In my remarks, I commented on what I think some general conservative principles are. I think you agree with them. We've talked about this some. Local control, choice, accountability systems, and content. Again, conservative leaders for education, that's what we are about. These are the areas we plan to focus on. Let's take each and say a little about them, a few minutes on each. Local control is the first. Let's go to Senator Mike Wilson. Mike?
Local control for us is very, very important. As I've been the chair of education, been on the education committee for a long time now, as I travel around the state, I see the innovation and creativity that takes place at a local level. However, our problem is we have failing schools in the inner city, and we're constrained by the federal 4 models, which we all know don't work for turnarounds. And one of the things that I've been pushing and trying to get for the last few years is charter schools. We're one of the states, the handful of states that does not have charter schools yet, as a choice that they would be able to choose for turnaround model, because this is in the inner city and we have an achievement gap between white students and African American students that is 40%, and that's pretty unconscionable. And however, we cannot choose that model. We were bound and constrained by the federal models, which is, to me, it just didn't work. We all know it didn't work. So that's one of the areas of local control that I'm really looking forward to.
Now you've got, under ESSA, more autonomy, more control. So is the thinking by you and others, how do we use that greater degree of autonomy to address a problem like this?
Absolutely. I think that is increased responsibility that we have now upon us to use it and use it correctly and wisely to do the very best. I think all of us are in it because we care about our kids and we want to do the best by them so that they can have a top shelf education. Every child should. And unfortunately for us, that's not happening across the state. But if we go to the local level, in the districts, we have 173 districts. And when they have the capabilities to make those choices on their own, they can choose their own turnaround models from ESSA now. And actually it says the state must approve them. It doesn't say that they have a look at it and say, well, we don't quite like this or that and the other. It says they will approve it. And so that gives that autonomy, but it comes at a great price of responsibility too as well.
Senator Wilson, do your colleagues know, just quickly, briefly, do they know that there is a new opportunity?
I don't think they know quite as well, but I did have a bill trying to line up with the ESSA this last session. And, I think some of them really learned a lot more about it, but we're also doing some efforts over the interim to educate people on ESSA and try to get some folks from Washington that were involved in that to come to an interim joint committee. Because one of the things they've forgotten is that, legislators are responsible in Kentucky for education policy and framework.
Right. And you'll tell them, right?
I will.
You'll tell them.
I will. Amen.
Paul Boyer from Arizona, in from 112 degrees, happy, wearing lots of clothes, lots of undershirts underneath. Quite chilly in here for you, probably, huh, Paul? I'm kidding. Let me just say something. We as Republicans need to reaffirm our commitment to public education. We believe in choice very much, but just because we're for improving public education, choice, and market forces to drive competition doesn't mean we don't support public education. Yep. We support good public education. it's it's a fundamentally American notion that we believe a free, high-quality education for every child ought to be available. This is a Republican notion. We need to say this more often when we talk about education. What other types of choice, Paul, do you see that show promise in Arizona or elsewhere?
Sure. So we actually, with the passage of ESSA, we have a lot of flexibility on testing. In Arizona, we've actually carpe diemed, if you will, already. We have...
Now do it in Greek.
You put me on the spot, and
you can do it.
I'll get back to you on that one.
You'll come back and do that. I know he can do this.
So we pass what we call a menu of assessments. And what that is with the passage of ESSA, in the state of Arizona, districts and charters will have a menu of options of national tests, nationally recognized tests, I should say, that they can choose from that might be more in line with their curriculum that they're already offering. And so the reason for it, I'm in the classroom every day. In fact, class starts on Monday. This has been a working trip for many reasons for me.
Have you seen programs we have choice experts in this audience for sure. Have you seen programs in other states that you would like to emulate?
That what?
That you would like to emulate, that you would like to implement?
Well, I mean, I think in Arizona, we pretty much have universal choice, if you will.
Right.
I mean, we're pretty fortunate. We have charters, we have open enrollment,
okay.
we have private homeschool ESAs. I mean, there's options in Arizona.
Right.
So 2 years ago, when this bill came up, the reason why it came up, I was just talking to my headmaster. I teach at a classical school, so my principal, and we were just talking. We offer the PISA test. And in the break, he says, you know, wouldn't it be great that if that was the only test that we had to offer to our students this year? I thought, that's a great idea. So 2 years ago, I ran a bill, and everyone told me why it couldn't work. It ended up dying at the last minute. But with the passage of ESSA, everyone this year, we finally figured out, okay, how can we make this work? I'm sure Arizona's a lot like most states where we have 180 days in the school year. We want students to think, to write, and to speak well. I mean, that's my goal. I can't do that if I only have less than 180 days in the school year. I need more instructional days with my kids, with my students. And so you've got half days, you've got spirit days, you've got field days, you have so many things that cut into instructional time with your students. And because of teacher evaluations in most states, especially in Arizona, part of our evaluations are contingent upon how our students perform on tests. That incentivizes teachers to, you hear the teach to the test. I have a good friend who teaches Greek and calculus, and he's paranoid, he's worried about how his students will do. And I'd say, Brian, I think you're gonna be okay. But if he's worried, I wonder how many other teachers are worried, and they just spend precious instructional time where we could be talking with our students about curriculum. Instead, we're focused on teaching to the test,
yeah.
and then proctoring the test.
Good. I'm just glad to hear there is a teacher of Greek and calculus.
That's right.
That means somebody can take a course in Greek and calculus, or both. Good. Thank you. Now, you guys are very far ahead in choice, and there may not be much other states can teach you, but people can learn a lot from Arizona. But just last point, the results are in because of choice, and you're pleased with the results, and the state is pleased.
That's right. So what little known fact, Arizona is #1 on the NAEP scores, or the nation's report card, on math gains from 4th to 8th grade. I mean, that's huge, and we do attribute that to choice. Because we have so much choice, because we give parents so many options, I mean, #1 in the nation. If you pull out our charter, all of our charter networks, all of our charter schools, and compare them to all of our district schools nationwide, we're neck and neck with Massachusetts and
Good.
New Hampshire.
Great. And that's not a state test, it's national, but that is one other very good test. The NAEP is a great test, great exam. I put a lot of effort into NAEP when I was there. It was one of the few things I thought we ought to do, was to have a good, uncorrupted assessment. I think it's stayed pretty uncorrupted. Amanda Price from Michigan. You have said parents are the #1 customer of the education system. You've expressed frustration with the lack of transparency for parents. Can you talk about how you think we might get more transparent and accessible information to parents this under the rubric accountability. Accountability.
I'd be happy to. I come from Michigan where our accountability system consisted of colors. So green was good, red was bad, and lime green was something. Very, very confusing to me as a legislator, but I look at it from the perspective of the average parent. Average parent who's working, who's got children in school and can't spend 14 hours looking at what the math magicians have constructed to be the accountability system. So I think you, first of all, need measures that will produce good outcomes to improve a school, but also the language has to be simple, and we have to avoid what I call edge-speak, all of the terminology, because the parent, if I don't understand it as a legislator who's working in that day by day, parents are just going to look at it and say, oh, okay, I don't know what this means. I won't hold my school accountable. I won't hold my principal accountable. I won't go to the school board and say, how come my school's lime green when it should be green or purple or whatever? So it's looking at it from the perspective of the parent, first of all, and then giving that parent the opportunity to push improvement into the school systems.
It's great, difficulties for the colorblind parent here too.
Good point.
Always thinking of the forgotten few, Anyway, but you make a great point. I mean, I've been saying for 30 years, if you don't understand what the teacher, evaluator is saying, it's probably not your fault. I mean, there is a retreat into jargon, omnia exeunt into mysterium. This guy inspired me last night. He conducted his entire dinner conversation in Greek. Paul. If you do not understand what they're saying, if they load it up with this education jargon, it's probably baloney, because the tasks of educators are really quite simple. You were saying earlier, Paul, what do parents want? And you were talking about parents being customers. You do a survey of parents, ask them what they want schools to do. It's not educational jargon. They say, teach our children how to read and write and count and think correctly. Help them develop reliable standards of right and wrong, and help them get prepared for college or work. Pretty straightforward. You don't have to say, I wonder what you mean by that. But when you go see some teacher evaluator who says, well, we're having some problems with the interface compensating for the deficit of the learning gap between what? Well, here's a color. That doesn't address it. Just my second question for you before we go on to Howard. Accountability. I mean, we've got local control, we have choice, we have accountability, we have content. Is this where the greatest resistance will come? Accountability. Isn't this where the left, liberals, want to stake their ground? I was listening to a speech the other night from the head of a teachers organization talking about not colors, but evaluations. A lot of these organizations, I won't say teachers, but a lot of these organizations, because I think in a lot of cases, the teachers are better than the organizations that represent them. I really do. The Puritans believed a community of sinners could make a great church. This is kind of the opposite. A community of really, basically, mostly pretty good people can make a lousy church when they have the wrong pope. Well, we won't get into that. Anyway, I go afield. Do you see that this is where the resistance will come?
I think it is a lot of resistance there because they've not been held accountable to this kind of standard before. I also see a lot of resistance to teacher evals too, but I look at it from a perspective of, I think most teachers want to know how to improve their profession and their performance, and this is just the next level of that accountability is taking it to the school level. Can I just share a real quick story?
You bet.
Under the color system, I had a school district in my county who was a green school. Green is good, being Michigan State person.
Yeah. Good luck. Avoid Alabama.
But just for the fact that one family who had an ELL student and a special needs student, and they were on a mission trip, that school went from a green to a red. And that red is bad under this system. It's remarkable that those two subgroups of two students could change the whole trajectory of a school in an accountability system. So I think that's another factor that you need to weave into there, that one or two kids cannot change the outcomes for a whole school.
Good, good. Thank you. Thank you very much, Amanda. We're going to get a chance to get the audience in on this with questions very soon after Howard. Let me just mention, if I'm wrong about the source, somebody can correct me. I think it was the Milken Institute put out a study on this teacher question. It's the most remarkable thing. I carry it in my suitcase. Take two students in the third grade, both testing at the 50% level. Give one student a teacher evaluated by everybody, other teachers, principals, parents, as a great teacher, and take the other student and give that child to a poor teacher who's about, to be encouraged to leave or whatever. In 2 years, the first child will be testing not at the 50% level, but at the 80% level. The second child in 2 years will be testing at the 20% level. What more do you need to know about the importance of evaluating teachers? Why is it that parents, again, who are not experts in the jargon, say, oh no, we don't want her, we want her? People know this. Howard, welcome. You are doing so much, so many interesting things to talk about. Conservatives around the nation are worried about federal control of educational content. How does ESSA, the new legislation, affect state and local control of content?
I think it frees the states, devolves power to the states more in education than anything since the Reagan administration. It truly does, and it's incumbent on conservative legislators to help the conspiracy theorists understand that just because Obama called it a Christmas surprise doesn't mean it's a bad thing. And in fact, we look at the language of the bill itself, and it says the department cannot mandate, direct, control, coerce, or exercise any direction or supervision over the academic standards adopted or implemented by the state. They are prohibited from endorsing any curriculum. No federal employee can make the adoption of specific academic instructional content, academic standards, assessments, curricula, or program of instruction a condition of any grant, contract, agreement, or waiver. Congress has done a good thing to tell them, hands off. And now with Title I money, Title II money, and Perkins money, it's freed up so that we can use it as we see fit. Under No Child Left Behind, the annual yearly progress measures, we're getting states to fake the numbers. In fact, most states had, after the years of having to show annual yearly progress, had phonied the numbers so badly that in Utah, for example, we claimed that 90% of 8th graders were proficient in English language arts when the NAEP test in that same year showed that 36% were. And your states were all faking it the same too. So now we're going to reset back to an honesty factor, and rather than just focusing on English language arts and math scores, and by the way, many teachers would use the whole day just focusing on those because that's what was being measured. We now have the ability to consider the whole well-rounded education. And teachers are going to be able to include those other things that really lead to better language arts, better math, because now they're going to be included in the whole education of a child.
Great.
It's really quite remarkable. Already this session, after the passage of ESSA, in Utah, we passed mastery-based education law that we're beginning to implement. We passed a bill that will personalize learning for every child. Rather than the Horace Mann factory model conveyor belt, we want to personalize the learning for every child based on their learning style and their passion, rather than pounding square pegs into round holes. It really does free the states, and we've got to help the conspiracy theorists know that this is a good thing. None of us like federal involvement in education. And Reagan, of course, wasn't able to get rid of the Department of Education. And we all claim that there's nothing in the Constitution that empowers the federal government to have any say on education. But until Congress or the Supreme Court says otherwise, we have the Department of Education. But what Congress has done to limit their control over the states is so important, and we need to tell that message.
Good. I want to ask you a question. Now, you remind me of a story, ancient story. I remember appearing before the Senate when I was the nominee for Secretary of Education under Reagan. And the questions, of course, was is this department going to be abolished? And I remember going back and talking to the president. I said, they want a letter from you saying you're not going to abolish it before they confirm me. He said, oh, I hate to hang you up like that. I said, I don't care. I don't care. I don't have to do this. He said, no, I'd like you to go in there and maybe just make some sense of things. Again, talk the sense of the American people. I said, okay. I remember during that time, I was, besieged by the press. George Will, in a particularly George Will way, said, must you exist? That's what you do if you have a PhD, I guess. Anyway, there it is, but I think you're absolutely right. This is a major deal. One of the objections I've heard, and people have said to me, Bennett, you're a core guy, not a Common Core guy necessarily, but a core guy. You believe there are certain things every student should learn. I said, absolutely. I said, I don't believe, left to their own, Kansas is going to say, we're coming out against fractions. No more fractions. No more reading. We don't need it, of course, there are certain things every child should learn. Given that the federal government doesn't mandate, Howard, what ensures that a test like NAEP, the National Assessment of Educational Progress, which we all like, still has coherence? What assures that parents in the 50 states, legislators in the 50 states, will have some measure of consensus or agreement on things that should be taught?
It's up to the state legislatures to make that decision, but I think all of us want every fifth grader to be able to know and do certain things.
Right.
But this ESSA empowers us to move away from the end-of-level autopsy test, that high-stakes end-of-level test. It empowers us to move away from that and have formative tests that declare mastery, and every child might get mastery at a different point. It empowers us to do that, and even to have those designations of mastery for each child to be stackable toward the end of the year to be a virtual end-of-level test. Because right now it's an autopsy.
Good.
And it's often not even, the scores aren't even available for placement in the next school year. And so we really have a lot of freedom here, and I recommend state legislatures across the nation look at ways of embedding the right questions throughout the year in tests that are formative rather than just an autopsy at the end of the year.
Great, good. Do we have a few minutes for questions from the audience? Good. You tell me when we need to stop. Chris Beach, where are you? Where's Chris Beach? Where? Okay. What are you going to do? Mics? We have some microphones floating around. If you have a question, let's go see the folks with the microphones walking around. Let's go.
We have a gentleman right here.
Gentleman right here. Okay, good. State who you are and where you're from. What your intentions are.
J-Lo, my intentions are honorable, sir.
Okay, good. You may proceed.
Jay Lawrence, and I'm vice chair of the committee that Paul chairs, Education in Arizona. My questions deal with, first of all, many of us don't like Common Core math.
Sure.
Are we going to have some control over changing that? Will it be too expensive to even bother changing it?
Great. Who wants to handle it? Howard, sure.
I'd like to comment on that because a lot of us are looking at what we think is Common Core math, but there's an app for that, you know. You can download the app, and this is what I tell people who are upset about it, is go through that 4th grade Common Core standards and identify the parts that are objectionable. And in every case, the person will come back to me and say, this is exactly what I want my 4th grader to know. What we're finding out is that some of the curriculum elements, some of the ways some people are delivering math seems to be what's called fuzzy math or other kinds of things like that. But the standards, I would challenge anybody in here to go to the app, go to the standards, and find a standard that you disagree with. And even E.D. Hirsch, who for years has published the books that homeschoolers and others really like, called What Every 3rd Grader Should Know, What Every 4th Grader Should Know, he has said those standards are good standards. They're exactly what I've been preaching all of these years, he said. And so we need to delve deeper and find out what really are the complaints, because it's usually about some of the curriculum and content, not the standards.
Yeah, and also delivery, I think. Going around the internet, there was a very popular video of a teacher teaching math to a child. It's almost incomprehensible for most of us. And the federal government certainly will not be requiring methods of teaching math as well as the content. So I think you're right. Next, please. Any other comments, panel, on this? Okay. Yeah.
Right here, yes, ma'am.
Good morning, Christina Culver with EdNexus Advisors, and thank you, Dr. Bennett. It was a conversation with you 20 years ago that got me into education policy. I just want to ask a question about lots of laughter. I have a question about technology in education. ESSA allows a lot of resources for states to think about how they can do the transition to digital teaching and learning and deploy blended and personalized learning in the classroom. And just love to hear a little more about that. And Howard, if you have interest in talking to that, and also love to know your opinion on that, Dr. Bennett.
Okay, I'll give mine last, but let's ask one of the panelists. Technology and education. Amanda?
I think it can be used to a great extent. But as we were talking amongst ourselves, I think it's not well taught to teachers yet. And that's a bridge that needs to be crossed in a lot of our education schools. So I'll let Howard seems to know a lot more about this.
Go ahead.
In Utah, we have really been a leader in the legislature offering to LEAs, not mandating, but offering to them licenses in technology and education. We have, for example, 10,000 of our 40,000 4-year-olds who are getting in-home pre-K experience, and the 5-year longitudinal study now shows that those kids who are low-income and ELL kids are actually scoring significantly higher in 4th grade math, science, and reading than the average students in the state. It's just profound, the result we're getting. We also have 55,000 licenses for early reading intervention for kids that are reading in kindergarten through 3rd grade below grade level, which is having a profound effect. We also have 200,000 licenses for math software, and every ELL kid gets 40 minutes a day of personalized English language instruction on a computer, and it's elevating those kids' scores dramatically. But as was said before, Amanda said, the problem is getting teachers to understand how to incorporate that in their instructional model effectively, because the teacher colleges are not teaching how to do it, and the school districts are typically blind to it.
Yeah, generational learning gap. The kids know the technology, but the teachers don't. And so that generation gap needs to be overcome. I was you wanted me to answer your question. I was very skeptical. Wrote a book with Checker Finn and John Cribb in the 90s, and we talked about technology and its effect on education. And we said, so far, we couldn't give it a good grade. That was mostly being used as a reliance by students so they wouldn't have to memorize multiplication tables or other things they don't have in their head. And boy, this really is generational. My blessed millennials who work for me and I hang out with and learn new language from, all of it fine, and music. A lot of them just can't do any math in their head. They just cannot do it. I think multiplication tables, but I'm not going to insist everybody go to Catholic school with Sister Jean and learn the multiplication table. But I thought people were using calculators and other things, to be lazy. Now I think it's different, and I think it's been shown. I was the chairman of a startup company, technology and education, K-12. I think it's been shown technology can be a tremendously useful instrument. Interestingly, for slow learners, for kids who need extra time, because the machine is infinitely patient. And I think you will see opposition from the left, a kind of Luddite opposition to the machine, to the technology, and fear that this will replace teachers. It won't replace teachers. It'll make teachers' time better. They'll be able to do more individual work, more individualized instruction. But I think we need, there may be such, but I think we need a best practices, kind of what works in technology education. And it needs to be updated every year because of the advances. This board I'm on, and I'm not promoting it here, it's just fascinating to me, Udacity, which was founded by this Stanford professor who invented the driverless car, and he was teaching robotics at Stanford. And he went online and had 140,000 students and told Stanford, isn't this great? I now have 140,000 students. The Stanford registrar and treasurer said, are they paying tuition? No, not such a great idea. He said, this is learning for everybody. Anyway, long story. He is now giving out, sponsoring nano degrees, 4 months of instruction in how to become an IT person. And if you don't get a job, you get your money back. And this is all done remotely. That's pretty interesting. And this is the future. We got to get onto it as much as old rhinoceroses like me have to drag ourselves kicking and screaming. If there's a problem, I yell for the nearest child. Help me turn on this TV, please. Next.
All right, we have a question right here from this gentleman in the back.
Comment and a question. For those who had an interest in the math standards and a very effective critique, I'd refer you to Dr. James Milgram, Stanford Emeritus Professor. He has gone throughout the standards and he's critiqued them, and also colleagues of former colleagues of Secretary Bennett's Department of Education have done an excellent job as well critiquing the math standards. Now my question. We worry about corporate money sometimes in politics and crony capitalism, I guess we would refer to it. The effect of Bill Gates and his money, the effect of the other, the Walton Foundation, all the other foundations that money gets funneled through, and how they end up in legislatures and departments of education. Is that something we should be concerned about? Should we be concerned about it even here at ALEC, about how some of that money that's behind Common Core filters its way into the political process to stop the ability of states to have more local and state control?
Any comment at the state legislature level? Corporate money influencing you to do things differently?
Well, I think that one of the things that's been done away with is race to the top and all the waivers with No Child Left Behind. And it is coming to the states. Part of the bill that I had, since we can take control of our own standards, we didn't want to rip out Common Core, because if you truly look at the standards, they are good standards. And what we decided that was the best approach for that was to take those that are in the classroom every single day teaching class, to review the current standards, to be able to revise them, to be able to narrow them, or put more standards in. And through that process, at the end of it, as we got through it, they would also align the test with it. And if the test didn't align, they would have to go out with an RFP to someplace else that has a vendor, because we know with Common Core, really it was the curriculum and the testing vendors that created huge problems for us in that. And I think that's where a lot of that money got funneled to. And so from the standpoint of that and some of the grants and everything that people have applied for, I think that if we really take the responsibility for our own standards, and part of what they didn't like was we had a review panel of governor appointees and legislators, as well as the Commissioner of Education, to make sure every step in the process had taken place. Because we didn't want to get rid of, we want to definitely have high standards. But we also want to align the test, so we don't have to do all of the teaching to the test. If we teach the standards and what we're supposed to teach, they should be able to pass this test very well. So maybe that's a long answer and didn't really answer your question like you expected, but.
No, that's a good answer. Anyone else? I think just a general answer, my experience, money makes things possible. Money makes the world go round. Money makes a lot of things possible, as you know. Aristotle says power is the ability to be or to make things be. And sometimes without the money, you can't get it done. At the same time, there are more warnings about money and riches in the New Testament than there are about anything else. So we know it's a risky business. In my experience in politics, I don't think I've ever been bought by anybody on anything, been offered to be bought. The test I say to people, young people coming up, is if they're giving you money to change your mind, change your view, don't take it. If they're giving you money because they support what it is you're doing, feel better about it. It's the old Reagan thing. Somebody gives me money, I take it. They're giving me money because they believe in what I'm doing. If all of a sudden they want you to change your mind, give it back.
Our next question is straight in the back.
Barry Fleming, State House in Georgia. I'm one of the uneducated masses, I guess, that is very pleased to hear you talk about this new thing called ESSA. But the skeptic in me has to ask you, if it's so good, how did Congress get it past the current administration?
Great question. You will notice some rejoicing at ESSA on the left. It's really a great question. And we were talking about this the other day with a group of people. And one of the answers is they think they're stronger. Many of the groups on the left, the teachers' unions and others, believe they're stronger at the local level. And they believe they'll be back to fight for another day, too. Take the fight out of Washington, where they're very limited right now because of a Republican House and a Republican Senate. Maybe bring it back to Washington if there's a change in administrations and also a change if the Democrats continue and there's a change in the House or Senate. Meantime, they will disaggregate the problem and work it at the state level. And they'll always hope, of course, for federal creep. That's the best answer I can give. Does anyone else want to say anything to that? Karen, do you want to speak to that? Okay. Anyone else? Yes.
Bill, yeah, I mean, I think if there was ever a bipartisan consensus, it was everybody hated No Child Left Behind. And on testing, there's actually quite a bit of consensus that we are over-testing, and this is left and right. And so ESSA really has started to address that we are testing too much. Tests should be high quality. They should be less than 2% of the student's experience throughout their high school career. And so I think that's part of the reason why you saw some consensus on ESSA.
Even liberals can recognize that No Child Left Behind was not working and Race to the Trough was not working.
But I will say, too, that even after ESSA's passed, the powers that be in Washington are still trying to take us backwards. And so this is why this group was formed, is to take it back and say, no, time out here. We want this to go forward in the manner that it was passed and not the manner in which it's regulated.
Somebody should say eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. But no, power loves power. Power loves to aggrandize. So, be careful, watch, they'll try to get it back. But I do think most of the fights will be at state level, don't you guys think?
Yes.
Yeah. And that's where you are. And again, there's strength here. And, we are forming conservative leaders for education at a time when this conservative wave is rising in the states, though you wouldn't know it from much in television. But it's there and it's true, and we should take full advantage of it, plus the opportunity this federal legislation affords. One more question, I think?
We have time for one
Gene
more in
Ward.
the back of the room.
Gene
We have
Ward,
more time.
Hawaii State House of Representatives.
Sorry?
Gene Ward, Hawaii House of Representatives.
Thank you.
Bernie Sanders opened a can of worms. The cost of education has captured not only the mind of the parents who are paying for it, but the young people. What do we do? And I know this is fast forwarding from a lot of the high school stuff that you're talking about, but it's coming to the point where it's the price of a house to pay a mortgage or the price of your education? This is on a lot of my constituents' minds, and this would be good advice from you if you could answer that. What do we do with the high cost of education?
Higher ed particularly.
Higher education.
Yeah, I have some thoughts, but go ahead. Anyone else?
Well, I just want to say one of the things our governor just did, he actually signed an executive order to authorize a scholarship for dual credit. And that dual credit classes, the goal is that high school students would have even up to 2 years of college when they graduate from high school, but it also included stackable credentials and certificates that they could get for manufacturing or other, things like that, which we were very excited about because of the skills gap that we're experiencing all over the United States. But I think that's a way to approach it too, because a lot of kids that are underprivileged and from the poverty areas, they can't afford to take dual credit classes, and this will now allow that for students in Kentucky, first years, seniors, and then all of a sudden we see our colleges who said they didn't have any money stepping up to the plate and say, I'll put $600,000 in and I'll put this in so we can get the juniors this year too. And they see the advantage of doing this to bring them to their colleges afterwards. But that's one of the ways that we're kind of approaching it in our state.
Accountability in higher ed. I wrote a book on this called Is College Worth It? And telling the truth is the first part of this. Greatest works of fiction in America are a lot of college course catalogs. Come here, plop down your money, reach for the stars. Hell no, it's ridiculous. Reach for $200,000 in debt. You got to tell the truth. In this book, I'm not trying to sell it, but you may want to take a look at it. We did something that really ticked off the higher education community. We listed about 200 colleges and universities based on return on investment. They said, how crass, how crude of you to measure a college education by its return on investment. I said, well, this is something on people's minds, actually, is how much debt they have, because as you said, can't start a family, can't buy a house, and it would be important to know. Well, there are some places that give you a fabulous return on investment. You get into Stanford, go. If you get in actually better than Stanford, the South Dakota School of Mines, go. You will graduate and make more than the president of the College of Mines at the University of South Dakota if you are a petroleum engineer, if you can frack. Fracking is, yeah, never mind. Anyway, I don't need to explain that. But I'm in a perfect position to speak to this because I took arguably the most useless major in the world, philosophy major, okay? Return on investment for philosophy majors is terrible. Most of us turned out to be cab drivers, and that's not great, and with a PhD, truck drivers, which is a little better. People should know this. I met a young lady the other day. I said, what are you majoring in? She said, graphic design. I said, you like it? She said, I love it. I said, you're not going to make any money at all. It's one of the lowest paying, unless you're lucky. So young people need to know that. Go with your eyes open. Ask them, and there is federal legislation on this, at least being discussed by Senator Rubio and Senator Wyden. Colleges should publish how many students graduate. First of all, did you know that of all the students enroll in four-year colleges, 47% of them never finish? 47%. There's debt without the degree. And of those who finish with the degree, many of them are unemployed. As Paul Ryan said in his acceptance speech 4 years ago, they're just in their parents' basement staring up at Obama posters on the ceiling, wondering what did they do. So truth in lending, what's the employment record of graduates from your school? Why does it cost so daggone much? And I also think that colleges need to have skin in the game when it comes to their dropout rate and their failure of their students to pay back student loans. They advertise, they lie, the student comes in good faith, sees that it's basically fraudulent or so tendentious, it's not education, it's political indoctrination, wants to leave, wants his money back, they should be able to get their money back from the college. There's an insidious bill being pushed by the left, I'm going too long, which says students should be able to sue the colleges and not pay their student loans, but the taxpayers should pick up the bill. That's not a good idea. The colleges should pick up the bill for fraud, not us.
Bill, the Department of Ed, of course, under a rule requires under the Gainful Employment Act for private colleges to disclose all of this kind of information. And we as legislators have the ability to require our state-supported institution as higher learning to also disclose that kind of information,
Right.
so students can know before they go and don't end up taking a degree to nowhere.
Great.
And can I also add,
Please.
I think there has been, at least in Michigan, a shift in how much we funded higher ed over the last 30 or 40 years. Quite a bit different. But personally, I'm not sure there is a right to go to college.
There's no.
And so this discussion about how do we make it more affordable, maybe we make kids go to work. Maybe we have, you go, take longer. It's not, you don't have, it's not this extra layer of high school. It's a privilege. And so I think, I don't agree with a lot of the assumptions that every kid's gonna go to college. There are lots of other opportunities.
That was another Bernie thing, free college. They changed it to debt-free college. Sounds better.